Welcome to Positive Read-Ins. Today's episode is on William Shakespeare's Macbeth. Where to begin with this work? Like all Shakespeare's work, it is complicated. There are lots of concepts and ideas being developed, language that is full of meaning, multiple meanings. This is the last of Shakespeare's great tragedies, at least as described by A.C. Bradley, kind of the famous Oxford professor. Those tragedies would be Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, and they would go in that order as far as their development. Macbeth was believed to have been written around 1606, just after King Lear and before Antony and Cleopatra, and there's a clear change in Shakespeare's style after that, after Macbeth. The tragic characters were no longer as tragic. There was a redemptive value to them. The characters such as we get in Coriolanus and The Winter's Tale, for instance. But in here, we still have this kind of brutalism, this tragic characters that have no way out of the mess they've created themselves. No redemption. They did have a way out, though. Macbeth did, certainly, and that's why he is a tragic character. He was able to see, to imagine what would happen if he goes through with his plan. So the beginning of the play, it starts with, famously, these three witches. And the famous lines, when the Hurly-Burly's done, when the battle's lost and won, that will be before the set of sun, where the place, right? And then they end with their famous, fair is foul and foul is fair, hover through the fog and the filthy air. These lines, in some ways, might just seem like they're kind of set in the tone for the witches, but really they're actually set in the theme for the play, which is throughout this play we get contradictions. They use the word equivocation. Famously in Act 2, Scene 3, the porter has a kind of a joke on this. He's talking about alcohol, how it's an equivocator. It both makes the man stand, gets him sexually ready, but then also makes him fall. And that's the comic version of what we get throughout the entire play. Lady Macbeth sleepwalking. She's asleep, yet she's walking. She's asleep, yet her eyes are open. Right? Everything is a puzzle. The witches trick Macbeth. Right? They tell him he will be the future king. They tell him he has nothing to fear until Birnam Woods comes towards him. He cannot be defeated by any man that was born a woman or born from a woman. And all of this these are all word puzzles, and that's a key here of this play, that reality is not what it appears to be, especially when you want it to be something else. Now, that imagination that provokes fear is actually a good thing. And this is actually brought up in Bradley. I'm going to be drawing a lot from this. When Macbeth is told at the beginning in front of Banquo that the witches appear out of nowhere and tell him he will be the king, he could be the king of Scotland or will be the king of Scotland, Banquo very quickly sees the fear on Macbeth's face, and perhaps not in the performance, but certainly in the reading of this play, we can figure this out, that, this is because Macbeth is already thinking about the possibilities of murdering Duncan so he can become the king. and then he's starting to think about the consequences of that. Now, his wife, who a lot of readers would take as kind of a chief villain, someone who really pushed Macbeth into committing this murder in order for him to become king, she just lacks some of the imagination that Macbeth has, at least before the act. Her imagination catches up with her after, and this is what kind of sends her off into madness. But right at the beginning, when she hears, this is Act 1, Scene 5, she says, "Yet do I fear thy nature." She fears Macbeth's nature. "It is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way." The nearest way would be killing Duncan to become the king. She fears he's too much full of human kindness. And what is that human kindness? I think we can interpret that as the imagination, the ability to imagine that someone, the process of having to kill someone, or the gory elements of that, the pain that you can cause others, the consequences that you will have to face. All of this involves imagination. She sees it as kindness, that he's not strong enough to do this. And she wants to pour her spirit into his ear, she says, which would be, I think, an obvious reference to Hamlet's, the way that Hamlet's father was killed. She calls on the dark spirits to come and give her strength, to unsex her, she says. And I think that is, she's calling for cruelty. She wants to become cruel in order to kind of help her husband commit this act. And this brings us into another theme, that the committing this act is really going to trap these characters, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, into the present, into that, and into the past, into that act. As soon as they heard that Macbeth could become king, they immediately are living in the future, right? She says, Lady Macbeth says, "This ignorant present." The letters that she's getting from her husband transported me beyond this ignorant present, and I feel now the future in the instant. So she's just really living for that future, what she can imagine. And Macbeth says something very similar to that, where he says, "And nothing is but what is not," which again, that's the equivocation, but it also means that nothing exists except for what isn't. It's that future, the possibility. And this is what he is fully focused on. So we've got equivocation, we've got these contradictions, these two things at once. Everything can be interpreted in multiple ways. We also have the future, these characters that are only living in the future, not thinking about their consequences until after the murder, and then basically trapped in that murder, in that act, and then therefore have no future, which of course makes them kind of characteristically tragic, in the sense that the thing that they're going after to get, which would be the legacy of being king and the prestige, they ruin it for themselves through doing that, this is your Aristotelian reversal that you would expect in a classic tragedy. So Lady Macbeth gives Macbeth the kind of, I guess, the strength that he needs to go through with this, tells him about how they're going to do this, and he's thinking he's going to go with it. But shortly after that, this is just on really the next scene, Macbeth has this famous monologue that has even found its way into American and international politics, which I'll get to in a moment. He's reflecting on what this could lead. And again, this is the imagination that is allowing him to imagine the consequences, and is exciting his fear, which again is a big concept in this play. I think in the back here they call it an anatomy of fear. So in this monologue, he says, "If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly." Meaning if we could just, if the murder was all done and set, once I did it, it's over with, then we should do it quickly. But again, the implication is the if, because it's not going to be done right then. There's going to be consequences to face. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his success, that but this blow might be the be-all and the end-all. Here, but here upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. So if we could just end it, if the assassination could also take with it the consequences, we could, as he says here, on this shoal of time, jump to the life to come. We could, bring ourselves into this higher level of a position. But, right, he says, but in these cases, we still have judgment here on earth and here in their position in the world. That we teach bloody instructions, which being taught return to plague the inventor. So he's the inventor of, obviously he's not the real inventor of this. This would be a very old idea, but basically the inventor of, he's killing the king in order to become the king. And that's the bloody instructions he's teaching others, and it's going to come back to plague him because others are going to come in order to get ahead. This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poison chalice to our own lips. And the poison chalice is the line I was talking about from International Politics. I believe it was Justice Jackson of the Nuremberg tribunals that used that line, that essentially once we set this high bar in which to hold others to, we could be bringing that on ourselves, right? Bringing this poison chalice to our own lips, because it could be used against us, as certainly maybe it should have been, but has not. And for Macbeth, the poison chalice is the fact that he's becoming the king, but he's also creating the means for other people to overthrow him, and this is going to create all kinds of other problems, worries. He sees this. And because of this, he decides he's not going to do this, right? And the next, just after this, he runs into his wife and he says, we're not going to do this. Let's forget all about this. People are talking really great about me. I'm getting golden opinions, as he said, and, I shouldn't ruin it. That would have been the smart thing. His wife takes this as, she says here, was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Hath it slept since and wakes up so green and pale, right? It kind of hung over. You imagine yourself in this greatness, and that was almost like an intoxication, and now you've kind of sat on it, you thought about it, you've woken up feeling hungover, and you're not up to it. And she even says, are you afeard to be the same in thy own act and valor as thou art in desire? And this obviously challenges him. Are you afraid? Are you chicken? You gotta, are you afraid to be what you actually want to be? But it also brings in another very important theme, and that is the desire for greatness, but also not bringing it into action when it is pathological or dangerous, and being able to, I guess, have the desire but not act on it when you know that when you can imagine the consequences that could come, or you know that it's wrong. And this line from Lady Macbeth is really what drives him into doing this, and they go through with it. Macbeth, that's not the end of his imagination. He goes on to imagine famously seeing a dagger kind of floating in the air, which he calls it from it's the product of an oppressed brain, which is true. This must be the effects of both realizing this is wrong, realizing that he shouldn't be going through with this murder just in order to get ahead, but at the same time, wanted to, being kind of torn between the desire and an action that is wrong, and of course imagining the consequences, and therefore he literally sees this dagger floating here. Now, this is all really leading up to the second act. It's in early in the second act that he actually kills Duncan. He does this off stage, and really the rest of the play is dealing with the consequences of that. This is a short play. It's shorter than any of the other tragedies. It's really compact. It's full of action. The first act has seven scenes, I believe. 7 scenes, and it's all just one after another. No fluff. Everything is kind of leading up to this murder of Duncan. He does this, and even after the fact, he's again, he's getting scolded by his wife. You're infirm of purpose. He brought the daggers with him because he doesn't even know what he's doing. He imagines that he hears someone say, Macbeth does murder sleep. And again, this is probably his conscience telling him that he's never going to be, he's never going to have rest again, right? As he says here, the sleep is the death of each day's life, sore labor's bath, balm of our hurt minds, great nature's second course, the chief nourisher of life's feast. So all of this is the importance of sleep, and he's no longer going to have access to that because he's going to be living with the guilt, living with the trouble, but also worrying about other people who could be coming for him. And again, this is just the beginnings. Shortly after this, we have the knock on the gate. This was famously written about by Thomas de Quincey. Thomas de Quincey's argument in there, which I've talked about in another video, my Luigi Mangione video. The way that de Quincey talks about this is he says that we were brought into this murder, into this mind, into this hell that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth kind of had entered themselves, and that knock basically brings us back out into the real world, and that contrast is what really makes us see the horribleness of this act, this murder. And of course, that's followed with the joke of the porter right after that. So again, like in all Shakespeare's plays, there's always some comedy in the tragedy, and there's always some tragedy in his comedy. So this act again leads to other murders. Of course, Macbeth feels threatened by Banquo. Remember, Banquo should know, he's not the good guy I think people take him for on first reading. He should have known that Macbeth is the one that killed Duncan, because he was there when they got this prophecy from the witches. He also asked about his own. They said his kids were going to become king. So Macbeth thinks he needs to get rid of him. And that's what he does. He hires some murderers to get rid of him. And then he, again, famously sees Duncan's ghost, which, again, has to do with the power of imagination and fear and even the inability to see that. So in Lady Macbeth's, it's an inability to see it, and it doesn't save them. In the case of Macbeth, he can see it, but he has no resolve. He can't allow that imagination and fear to guide him not to do the thing that he knows he shouldn't do, and also that maybe his wife is encouraging him to do. Some people might take this as a misogynist kind of portrayal of women, an anti-woman, look. I don't think that's the case. Lady Macbeth actually does, certainly after this, she comes across as a bit more sympathetic. She is disgusted by the sight of Duncan. She said she couldn't have killed him because she imagined him being like her father. She famously, in her sleepwalking scene, what does she say here? Let me go to this scene. She says, out, damned spot, out, I say, 1, 2, why then 'tis time to do it. Hell is murky, right? She's in a hell literally now. We fear, who knows it, when none can call out our power to corrupt, to accompt, right? So she's basically, we don't need to fear any of this. But then she says, yet who would have thought the old man to have had so much blood in him? So that, I think, really brings home how gory this scene must have been, that she couldn't imagine how much blood was in this man. And so she is maybe not contrite, but close. But at the same time, she was calling for her husband to commit murder to get ahead. And what to make of that? Are women attracted to murderers? She appears to be, because maybe that's the strength that it can give him. It puts him in a higher position, and by connection, it puts her in a higher position, and she's willing to sacrifice all to get into a higher position. Again, that's the tragedy of it. For her, it comes late as far as to seeing it. She ends up killing herself, and her death causes a very famous response from Macbeth, which is worth reading. Also the source of at least two famous literary works, which I'll touch upon when I read this. So Macbeth says, she would have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. So, she would have died anyway. So he now, at this point, by Act 5, Scene 5, he doesn't really seem to care so much about his wife. And he has this kind of very bleak view of life. It's just, every day is just leading us on towards death, and it's just lighting the way for us fools, right? There is no meaning here in life. Out, out, brief candle. I said out, out is a Frost poem about death. Clearly, I think it comes from this. Continuing, he says, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. That's a common metaphor for life. Probably the most famous version is from As You Like It, Is All the World a Stage? But we get numerous versions of this in Shakespeare. Then he goes on to say, it is a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So we got the Faulkner novel there as well. So by this point, the murder of Duncan has led both characters, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, into a hell, a literal hell. And that would make sense why, essentially, once they decide to go through with this murder, the rest of the novel is under the cover of night. The moon is down, as Fleance says. Also another novel, Steinbeck novel there. So they're in a hell, and the natural order is disturbed, as we get in most of Shakespeare's plays, whether they're tragedies or comedies. The natural world is disturbed in some way, and by the end, it needs to be restored, either through death, murders, or marriages in the case of a comedy. And at this point, Macbeth is almost nihilistic, right? At the end of that scene, after his wife has died, and he says that, the life is just a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury, and signifying nothing. It means nothing. He ends this by saying, I again to be aware of the sun and wish the estate of the world were now undone. So I wish the world was basically ripped apart, over with. He's calling for the destruction of the world. Yet he still has no fear that he's going to die until shortly after this, in the next our next act, next scene, we get Macduff, who comes with bringing the branches of Burnham Forest, and then he lets in this fight he lets Macbeth know that, right, when Macbeth says, "I bear a charmed life, which must not yield to one of woman born," and Macduff says, "Despair that charm, and let the angel whom thou still hast served," maybe that would be the devil, "tell thee Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped." So the trick of the witches comes out. And of course he's killed after that. He had his head chopped off, put on the pike. So the message here, besides the fact that we should temper our desires and ambition with acting well, thinking about the consequences, I believe is also that we have to, the things that entice us, we have to look for the possible tricks within them. That language can be a trick. And so we have to keep, I guess, a cool head. But also maybe listen to our imagination and what we can see the dangers that it could be suggesting to us. I know that's likely an inadequate talk on this plague. There's so much more that could be looked at. Let me know what your experience is with Macbeth and what you think of it. Thank you.